11:59. It's at 11:55.
We get a bit confused on a Wednesday, though, don't we? Because it's PMQs. It's slightly different.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And we hand over to Chris and Gloria. So Badenoch will have a lot of issues she can go for Labour on, the government on. Steel is obviously a big factor. There's that survey showing that 300,000 companies are going to lay off staff.
Yep.
And that's even before the national insurance rise comes in.
The farmers, again, two big stories this week. The potential land grab of farmland.
If they want to build houses or a hospital, they can just steal the land off them at whatever price they want to pay. Yeah,
and the sustainable financial incentive, which have just ripped away from farmers. Kelly Seaton pretty much in tears on our show this morning. £15,000, like she said, that's half a farmer's salary. Half somebody that works on the farm, that's half their salary taken away instantly. And when you think about the logic of that farming incentive subsidy was in order to protect the environment.
Yeah.
So don't raise cows or plant wheat. We just want wildflowers and herb gardens and bees, etc. Oh no, we're not bothered about that anymore. We're not going to give you any money to do that. Just do what you want. Where is it? What are their principles?
The other thing is, I mean, farmers have to make plans, budgeting, and this was announced with. Did they get a half an hour notice? This was happening.
Yeah.
So suddenly, somebody in the Ministry of Agriculture, whatever it's called now, Department of Environment.
DEFRA.
Food and Rural Affairs. Suddenly realised we've run out of money. Well, they didn't know.
I know. It's outrageous.
It is staggering. If you had your private business like that, you'd go bust.
Do you think either of the leader of the Conservatives or the Prime Minister today will use this opportunity to take more potshots at reform?
I'd be astonished if Labour in particular don't have a go.
Yeah, me too.
Because Reform have had a difficult few days. There's a poll out today too showing that a third of Reform voters want a change of leader. Nigel Farage, I'm quite sure, will be in the chamber.
Rupert Lowe will be there, surely, but as an independent?
I think he's on his way to Cheltenham.
What, to the races?
Yeah.
Is he checked out already?
Yeah.
He should be there.
Yeah, he should. I might be
You might be wrong about that.
Might be wrong.
Wouldn't be the first time.
But he does go to Cheltenham. I know he does.
Wow.
But he also, it's interesting to see where he sits in the chamber because, of course, he normally sits with the independents.
That's what I was.
But he's moved.
Well, he's not sitting with the independents.
He's sitting next to a guy called Jim Shannon, but he won't sit with the Reform cabal now, of course.
Oh, it's all very sad, isn't it?
So here we are. The Prime Minister now about to get to his feet. They're all jumping up and down. Who's the Prime Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the progress in talks between Ukraine and the United States. We must now redouble our efforts to get a lasting, secure peace. Mr. Speaker, on Saturday, I'll convene international leaders to discuss how we can make further progress. Can I also pay tribute to the bravery and dedication of all those responding to the ship collision off the East Yorkshire coast? Our thoughts, and I'm sure of the whole House, are with the family of the crew member who is sadly presumed dead. Mr. Speaker, this week we introduced landmark legislation to get Britain building, paving the way to restoring the dream of home ownership for working people across the country. We're also driving forward our Employment Rights Bill, the biggest boost to workers' rights in a generation. That's our plan for change in action. This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Russia has abducted at least 19,000 Ukrainian children and transferred them to Russia. They have been told that their parents don't love them, they've been placed in Russian homes, and they have been re-educated. For this despicable crime and others, the International Criminal Court has issued 6 arrest warrants for Vladimir Putin and his gang. I note the Prime Minister's previous fulsome support for the ICC, and I also note his comments just last night about the support that the UK will offer to Ukraine in achieving a just and lasting peace. Will the Prime Minister confirm to the House that British peacekeeping troops will only be deployed to Ukraine if the peacekeeping deal includes both the return of Ukraine's children and Putin's prosecution?
Well, Mr. Speaker, firstly, I thank you for raising this issue because it is an absolutely terrible case of abduction and kidnapping. And when we say a lasting, just settlement or peace in Ukraine, it must, of course, involve dealing with this issue. And we are, as he would expect, raising it continually with our allies.
Ron Davis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Telford and Britain voted for change in July. Yet this week we saw the bizarre spectacle of the Conservatives attempting to bring back the Rwanda policy, clinging onto a gimmick that cost the British taxpayers £700 million, yet only sent 4 volunteers to Rwanda. As Labour works to secure our borders through our plan for change, does the Prime Minister agree with me? It's quite clear the party opposite have done absolutely nothing.
Well, he's quite right. They ran an open borders experiment that saw numbers go up to almost 1 million. And the leader of the opposition was the cheerleader, thanking herself for the lobbying that she did. The Rwanda scheme, yes, Mr. Speaker, £700 million of taxpayers' money to remove 4 volunteers. What a contrast. We've got the flights off, 19,000 people removed who shouldn't be here. As with the NHS, with prisons, the economy, everything else, we're clearing up the mess that they lost.
Even the opposition can be better off.
Later today, the Prime Minister is meeting the family of Sir David Amess. Sir David gave this House and our country 40 years of service. I hope the Prime Minister will agree that getting the response to his murder right is vital, not just to his family, but to our democracy. Mr. Speaker, every week, I speak to businesses who are letting go of staff or closing. Has the Prime Minister been given an estimate of how many people will lose their jobs because of his budget?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, just on the question of Sir David, he was a deeply loved and respected colleague, and behind me is the plaque, as is the plaque to Joe Cox in front of me. And I know this was deeply felt by the House, but particularly, as I acknowledged at the time, by the party opposite, who lost a colleague and a friend in the most awful of circumstances. Mr. Speaker, I am meeting the Amess family later on today, and will make sure that they get answers to the questions that they ask. Mr. Speaker, in relation to businesses, I'm really pleased to say we've got thousands of new jobs into the economy. We've got more investment in the last 20 years, an absolute record. Wages are up higher than prices. 3 interest rate cuts, the best boost for the cost of living for a very long time.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister needs to get out more. Inflation is up, and estimates of job losses are between 130,000 and 300,000. Okay. His tax rises are hurting every sector of the economy. Things are getting worse for nurseries. Nurseries are writing to stressed parents right now, telling them that fees will go up because of his jobs tax. Can he explain how more expensive childcare is good for the economy or for working families struggling to make ends meet?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're putting in childcare. Look at the breakfast clubs, 2 in her constituency. But she's rather forgetting the £22 billion black hole that they left, that we had to deal with. That's why we had to take the necessary but right measures we did in the budget. And what's her response? Not that she'd reverse them. Oh no, she doesn't say that. She attacks what we've done, but she doesn't say she would reverse it, because she wants all the benefits of our budget in return to investment, but she doesn't want to pay for it. That's how we got into the mess in the first place.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is out of touch, because he should know that nurseries are charging over £2,000 for full-time care. That's £24,000 a year after tax, and he's talking about 60p breakfast clubs. He has no idea what people out there are experiencing, and it is not just the families. Even councils must pay his jobs tax. To cope with it, the average council tax bill is increasing by over £100 in April, after he promised to freeze it. Hard-working families' money is going to the Chancellor instead of social care and fixing potholes. Why should these families pay more for less?
Well, she really shouldn't denigrate what she calls, I think, 60p breakfast clubs. She should be welcoming them. And she asked about council tax, Mr. Speaker. The Tories put up council tax every year for 12 years. Their manifesto, Tory LGA manifesto, government should remove the caps on council tax. And then Berkshire Council, Tory, wanted a 15% increase. We said no. Slough Council, again, Mr. Speaker, Tory, wanted 3%. We said no. Windsor and Maidenhead, Tory, now Lib Dem, wanted 25%. We said no. We're the ones that are doing the right things to get this country on the right track.
Mr. Speaker, the point is he promised to freeze and they are going up. And if he wants to talk about councils, let's look at Liverpool or maybe Birmingham, where the rubbish is piling up so high, people vote Labour and all they get is trash, just like what he's saying at the dispatch box. People all over the country are suffering, not just in Birmingham. Millions of elderly people have had their winter fuel payments snatched away. At the same time, care home fees are set to go up by a devastating £3,000 because of his jobs tax. How does he expect pensioners on a fixed income to make ends meet?
Mr. Speaker, this is why it's so important that wages are up higher than prices. That's why it's so important that the interest rates are coming down. This is the biggest boost for the cost of living for a very, very long time. What we're doing is picking up and fixing the mess that they left.
Go.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is not looking at what is happening out there. Every day I speak to businesses who are telling us that they think that they are going bust. And as if businesses and families didn't have enough to worry about, supermarkets say food prices will increase by over 4% because of the jobs tax. And that's before we get to the immoral family farms tax on the very farmers who work so hard to produce our food. What does the Prime Minister have against farmers anyway? Does he not see that his budget is killing farming in this country and he is making life so much harder for everyone else?
Mr. Speaker, the budget provided £5 billion for farming over the next 2 years. That is a record amount. We've set out the roadmap for farming, which has been welcomed by farmers. And many thousands of farms have benefited from the farming schemes. But she talks about prices. Wages are going up higher than prices. That's the first in a long time that's happened. So for families across the country, they're better off under Labour.
He's got no answers today. What the farmers are complaining about is the sustainable farming incentive, which he has just scrapped or withdrawn. They are making mistakes with this budget. And that's why in 2 weeks, the Chancellor will come to this House to present an emergency budget the Prime Minister said we would not need. They will try and make out it's because of global events, but the truth is they trash the economy with their bad choices. They'd look after pensioners. Then they snatched winter fuel payments. They said that they would be pro-business, but they hiked taxes on jobs. And he, Mr. Speaker, he promised to freeze council tax, but it's going up by £100. This is a high-tax, low-growth, job-killing government. Will he use the emergency budget to fix the mess he's made?
Mr. Speaker, inflation under them 11%, £22 billion black hole, a mini budget that made us the laughing stock of the world, and they want to give lectures on the economy to us. No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With 1 in 8 young people across the country not in education, employment or training, people in rugby are worried about a wasted generation. Too many people with disabilities and health conditions are not getting the help that they need to get into work. So will the Prime Minister set out how this government will give everyone who is able to work the support they need, provide compassion to those who can't work, and fix the broken welfare system left behind by, you guessed it, the Conservatives?
I thank him for raising this issue. Mr. Speaker, I come from a family that dealt with disability through my mother and brother over many years, so I do understand the concerns that have been raised by him. But we inherited a system which is broken. It is indefensible economically and morally, and we must and we will reform it. We will have clear principles, Mr. Speaker. We will protect those who need protecting. We will also support those who can work back to work. But Labour is the party of work. We are also the party of equality and fairness.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to begin by giving a shout out for Young Carers Action Day today, but I promise the House I will not sing. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has rightly spoken about the need to get more people into work, and he repeated that now, so people have more dignity, we can get the economy going, and we can cut the benefits bill after the disgraceful legacy left by the Conservatives. But does the Prime Minister recognise that for many disabled people, the best way to help them into work is to support them properly with more special equipment, with training, with better healthcare and so on? And will he also today calm anxieties that he himself has raised for many of us, that the disability benefits for people who simply cannot work will not be cut?
Mr. Speaker, we will, of course, as I've just said, the principles, we will, of course, support those who need support, but also help those who can work into work. They'll be the guiding principles. But what we've inherited is shocking. And they ought to be silent. 1 in 8 young people not in education, work or training. That is a lost generation. That is their inheritance. They've got plenty to say now. They did nothing for 14 years and left this in terrible inheritance.
Davey.
Mr. Speaker, turning to international issues, can I congratulate the Prime Minister on helping to secure the restoration of US military and intelligence support for Ukraine? But can I press him on progress to persuade President Trump against damaging metal tariffs already hitting British industry? The Prime Minister knows that we on these benches believe he must be more robust with President Trump, like the Europeans and like the Canadians. So will the Prime Minister fly out to Canada as soon as possible to show their new Prime Minister and the Canadian people that Britain stands with its Commonwealth allies against Trump's threats and against Trump's tariffs?
Well, Canada is an ally and a very important ally too, and I've spoken to our allies on many occasions about the situation in Canada. On the question of tariffs, obviously, like everybody else, I'm disappointed to see global tariffs in relation to steel and aluminium. But we will take a pragmatic approach. We are, as he knows, negotiating an economic deal which covers and will include tariffs if we succeed, but we will keep all options on the table.
Claire Hanna.
Hi, Ila Fadra Conadív agus Shock na Gilga Fosta Desh Con Changa agus our culture Kellaroo or Fodandone. Happy St Patrick's Day, everybody, and happy Irish Language Week as well. An opportunity to use Irish language and culture across the world. It's an increasingly turbulent world, Prime Minister, with relationships and norms turned upside down over recent weeks, and that's why I congratulate the Prime Minister and the Taoiseach for re-establishing warm and firm relationships at their summit last week. And it's reassuring for all of us to know that whatever our constitutional future, that bond is lasting and refreshed. Will the Prime Minister join me in wishing a happy St Patrick's Day to all who value our shared bonds? And can I take this opportunity to invite him to Belfast in August 2027, which was announced this week as the host of the Fleadh na HÉireann for the first time.
Well, can I join her in wishing everybody celebrating a very happy St Patrick's Day? Mr. Speaker, she's right. We need a strong and settled relationship between the United Kingdom and Ireland, and the need for that has never been greater, which is why I was delighted to host the Taoiseach in Liverpool last week at our first annual UK-Ireland Summit. We've turned the page, started a new era for our relationship with Ireland, and I'd be very happy to go to Belfast in 2027. I want to go much sooner than that.
Understood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In just 20 days' time, new sentencing guidance will come into effect that the Justice Secretary has already conceded will be two-tier in its nature. It will mean that the colour of your skin or the religion you have can give you leniency in the eyes of the law and will plunge public confidence in the judiciary into crisis. But it is avoidable. We Conservatives have tabled a bill that, if backed on Friday, can stop this guidance in its tracks. So will the Prime Minister, will he now overrule his Justice Secretary and confirm here and now that he will back this bill, or will he simply step aside and prove he has in fact been two-tier Kia all along?
Well, everyone should be equal before the law. That is why the Lord Chancellor has taken up the issue with the Sentencing Council. But he needs to do his homework, because the proposal that he complains about was drafted in 2024. And the last government was consulted. And when they were consulted, what did they say? They said they welcomed the proposal. Now, Mr. Speaker, I understand that the Shadow Justice Secretary is taking the Sentencing Council to court. Perhaps he should add himself as the second defendant so we can get to the bottom of the ballroom.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to represent a constituency that has 8 synagogues, a thriving Jewish population, and the UK's largest Jewish cultural centre, JW3. But this week, I was horrified to read reports about rising anti-Semitism on NHS wards, and in particular, a shocking incident in which a Jewish NHS staff member was called a baby killer by their colleague. The NHS that I know and love is open to everyone, regardless of their background. So could I ask the Prime Minister, what is he doing to ensure that my Jewish constituents can safely use our beloved National Health Service?
Well, I thank her for raising these concerning reports. It is completely unacceptable for anyone to experience racism, discrimination or prejudice in the health service. I know my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, takes such reports extremely seriously. It is a fundamental principle that the NHS provides care and treatment for everyone, regardless of race, faith or background. This is a really serious issue. You've let yourself down, you know it. I expect all trusts and healthcare providers to take necessary action against any staff who've expressed views that do not reflect the views and values of the NHS.
Dave Dugan, a closed question.
Question 9, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, he asked about UK-US relations. As he knows and the House knows, I'm committed to strengthening those relations. The US is an indispensable ally. We are working together to try to secure a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. And I've spoken to the President on a number of occasions, including this week.
Dave Dugan.
I agree with the Prime Minister in those sentiments. The ceasefire negotiations this week are a cause for great optimism, and I welcome the efforts that the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, had done in leading that priority. But last week at the Dispatch, the Prime Minister said in answer to my right honourable friend, the member for Aberdeen South, that he had no knowledge of the United States planning to withdraw military aid from Ukraine, yet they did that the following day. It's against that backdrop, because I know the Prime Minister wants a just and lasting peace in Ukraine that respects Ukraine's borders and territorial integrity, when he's impressing that priority upon the President of the United States, what reassurance can he give the House today that the President of the United States is actually listening?
Let me give this reassurance. As soon as that step was taken, I and my team started work to try and ensure that we could get back to a situation of full support for Ukraine. I won't detail everything that was involved over the last week. I can assure him and the House a huge amount of hard work, discussions and diplomacy was used with all of our allies and others to ensure that we could get yesterday to go as well as we hoped it would. I am pleased that we've made progress. I think that's very important for Ukraine, and I'm extremely pleased that support has been put in, backed by the US, for Ukraine. So that's what I did once I understood what had happened. I'm pleased with where we've got to, but as ever, we must go further.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Disabled people in my constituency are frightened, and they're frightened because they're again hearing politicians use the language of tough choices, and they know from bitter experience that when politicians talk about tough choices, it means the easy option of making the poor and vulnerable pay. So instead of cutting benefits for disabled people, wouldn't the moral thing to do, the courageous thing to do, be to make a real tough choice and introduce a wealth tax on the very wealthiest people in our society?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite left a broken welfare system which locks millions out of work. That is indefensible, in my view, economically and morally. Of course we need to support people who need support. We need to help those who want to work to get back into work, and I think there's a moral imperative in that. He talks about a wealth tax. We have raised money, the energy profits levy, taxing non-doms and air passenger duty on private jets. But this isn't a bottomless pit, and we must kick-start growth to get the economic stability that we need.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Most people would accept that we need more housing in this country, yet so often it's not accompanied by the necessary infrastructure. In my own constituency, thousands of houses are proposed, yet without the 250 million to upgrade junction 12 of the M5, the inspector is likely to rule our plan unsound. So will the Prime Minister use his upcoming planning and infrastructure bill to see how developer and landowner contributions can more effectively build this vitally needed infrastructure which would benefit communities up and down the country?
Well, he's right. We have to get the houses built that we need in his constituency and elsewhere, something that the party opposite failed to do. That's why we've introduced the infrastructure bill, which I think he welcomes, and that bill will get Britain building so we can deliver on those 1.5 million new homes through our plan for change. In relation to the particular issue he raises, I know that he and my honourable friend, the member for Stroud, have been working together to try to resolve this issue, as I understand it. And I'm happy to ensure he gets a meeting with the relevant minister if that would help in taking it further.
Jean Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend this Labour government's landmark reforms to get Britain built through our plan for change? I look forward to working with ministers to ensure developers deliver on what they promise to local residents, so that new homes also have access to roads, GP surgeries and dentists, and don't create an extra burden on hospitals like the William Harvey Hospital in my Ashford constituency. What is the Prime Minister's message to the blockers standing in the way of the homes and vital infrastructure our country needs?
Well, he's a dedicated campaigner for his constituents. Well, we know who's been standing in the way for the past 14 years. It's the party opposite, and they've learned absolutely nothing. The leader of the opposition claims that she's never opposed growth or development. That's not what she's telling her constituents, Mr. Speaker. Only last month she wrote in her newsletter that she'll keep working with Conservative colleagues to block a vital energy infrastructure project in her own backyard. She's not alone. The Shadow Foreign Secretary, Shadow Defence Secretary, Shadow Terror, they're all at it. What a bunch of blockers.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Mr. Speaker, the Employment Rights Bill will grant union equality representatives the right to paid time off work.
It does.
Will the Prime Minister grant special constables the right to take unpaid leave to perform their duties?
I'm grateful to him for raising the question of special constables who play a very important role in our communities and keeping us safe. The numbers of special constables dropped under the last government. We support the existing employer-supported policing scheme and will support our special constables, but they dropped under the last government.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Long time.
I recently visited Middlesbrough's James Cook University Hospital and learned of the brilliant work in the neurosciences department for the survivors of stroke, brain and spinal injuries and many others. but it only has 18 rehabilitation beds to serve a population of some 1.4 million people, whereas the guidelines say it needs 80 beds, meaning that patients in the Tees Valley do not get the rehabilitation they need. So will the government remedy the position by ensuring that resources are allocated to meet the ambition to develop a world-class new rehabilitation centre to serve the Tees Valley and beyond?
Well, thank him for his question. It is important to hear about the important work that James Cook Hospital is doing in his constituency. We are investing £350,000 in research on interventions which support people with functional neurological disorders to rehabilitate them within the community. And of course our plan for change invested £25 billion to cut waiting lists, speed up treatment and shift more care into the community. In relation to the hospital, I'll make sure he gets a meeting with the Minister to see what further can be done.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Will the Prime Minister look at the case of my constituents, Mr. and Mrs. Adrian Fenton, who returned home from visiting France in their motorhome to discover an illegal immigrant concealed in the bike rack? They reported it immediately to the police, only to receive a fine from the Border Force of £1,500. Will he agree that my constituents ought to be thanked rather than punished? And does he accept that this action will send a message to deter anybody from acting responsibly in the future?
Can I thank him for raising this important case on behalf of his constituents? I've seen some of the details and I am concerned about it, and I do think it's important, as he says, that the Home Office look into it, and therefore we will do so, and I'll make sure that he is updated in relation to that in due course.
Richard Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Veterans in Sefton, one of the many remarkable charities in my constituency, indicate that statistics can only partly measure the price paid by servicemen and women. Incidents of broken marriages, suicides, alcoholism, deep depression and homelessness among veterans remain largely unquantified. Given that, will my right honourable friend restate Labour's commitment to providing our veterans the holistic support they need and deserve?
Well, we owe an extraordinary debt to our veterans, Mr. Speaker. We are committed to renewing the nation's contract with those who've served, and that includes the guarantees of homes for heroes for those who have served, dedicated mental and physical healthcare pathways in the NHS, and dedicated to sport to help those leaving service using their skills to find new and fulfilling careers.
Sarah Dyke.
Yesterday, with no notice, DEFRA closed SFI applications, leaving thousands of farmers who want to deliver public goods waiting for a year without support. So can the Prime Minister assure British farmers that they won't be left stranded and able to support environmental and food resilience goals due to lack of government support?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as she knows, the SFI schemes have operated to provide quite considerable support so far. There have been a number of schemes. They've closed in the past, and then a new scheme has been put in place. They were closed in 2022 and 2023 by the party opposite without the 6 weeks' notice. But we do support farmers. We will be putting forward more details at the spending review. But the difference, Mr. Speaker, in this government is we're funding the farmers. They failed to spend the budget.
Sultana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In October 2023, in an interview with LBC, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "I think Israel does have that right," when asked if cutting off power and water to Gaza was appropriate. For 11 days now, Israel has blocked the entry of vital goods and aid into Gaza, subjecting over 2 million people to collective punishment and starvation. Israel's decision to also cut off electricity to a plant supplying drinking water to 500,000 people is yet another blatant violation of international law and further evidence of genocide against the Palestinian people. In light of these facts, does the Prime Minister still maintain that Israel is not committing genocide?
Look, I'm really appalled by Israel blocking aid when it is needed at greater volume and speed than it's ever been needed. Blocking goods and supplies and power entering Gaza risks breaching international humanitarian law, and it shouldn't be happening. And we are doing everything we can to alleviate that situation.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In his extremely important upcoming discussions with other nations about Ukraine, will the Prime Minister focus on the fact that it was standard Russian procedure to take over other countries by having bogus elections and installing puppet governments? And will he therefore impress on other colleagues to be very wary of calls to hold elections in Ukraine during a wartime situation, which could result in the subversion and takeover by Russia of the entire country?
Thank you for raising a really important point, and the track record is there for all to see. On top of that, of course, we in this country did not hold elections when we were at war. That is a perfectly reasonable and normal course of behaviour. And yes, of course, that has to be part of our discussions as we go forward, including the meeting that I'm convening on Saturday.
Lord Hatton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. South Dorset is ready to play its part, making Britain a clean energy superpower. But after 14 years of Conservative failure, there are many untapped opportunities on our doorstep. Green investment opportunities such as Port Wind, Moor Wind and a hydrogen storage hub are all coming down the track. So can the Prime Minister reassure my constituents that the government will work with the Crown Court on these projects, invest in key infrastructure and ensure that South Dorset's green energy potential is hardwired into our plan for change?
Well, I thank him. He's absolutely right about making Britain a clean energy superpower. We are committing £2.3 billion to support hydrogen projects, and I recognise the huge potential of South Dorset to become home to a storage hub. We're ensuring public and private investment works together, and that's exactly what the Crown Estate Act does, unlocking significant investment, boosting offshore wind and kick-starting economic growth.
Andrew Rossendale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Leader of the Opposition has already mentioned, later today the Prime Minister will meet the family of our dear late colleague, Sir David Amess, who was so brutally murdered at his constituency surgery 3.5 years ago. I plead with the Prime Minister to reverse the decision to deny the family a public inquiry, despite similar inquiries being held into other tragic instances. So, will he please stop this shameful saga and heed the call of the Amess family for a judge-led public inquiry into David's death and the related failure of the Prevent programme from a heartbroken family?
Can I acknowledge just how heartbroken they are? It's difficult to imagine what they've gone through, what they continue to go through. And that's why it's very important that I meet them this afternoon, which I will do, and discuss with them all the questions they want to raise with me. Sir David was a respected and loved a colleague across this House, and as I say, I absolutely understand how his family must feel about the tragic circumstances in which he died and then everything that followed thereafter.
Final question, Chris Cage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow marks 29 years since 16 children and their teacher were murdered at Dunblane Primary School. In recent weeks, my constituents have raised with me the alarming fact that adverts offering handguns for sale are appearing on technology platforms like Google and YouTube. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that technology companies have an obligation to all of us to do everything proactively possible to prevent illegal advertising of this kind and not rely on a reactive, will remove it when it's reported approach, which is simply not good enough?
The thoughts, I'm sure, of the whole House are with the victims of the Dunblane massacres 29 years after the tragic event. The Online Safety Act will require online services to proactively remove such content from their platforms and prevent it appearing there in the first place. These duties fully take effect from Monday, and then we'll make sure that all companies meet their obligations.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
That was Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer taking questions from MPs in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's Question Time. We're crossing now live to Westminster Hall with our colleague Catherine Forster with all the news, what she's seen in PMQs. Catherine, what were your three main takes?
Yes, well, good afternoon from Westminster Hall, the oldest part of Parliament. Three things. First of all, how much international politics, how much time that is taking of the PM, and how very, very difficult it is trying to be incredibly diplomatic. So the very first question from a Lib Dem MP was about 19,000 abducted children that Russia have taken from Ukraine, and about an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. The MP wanted to know that we wouldn't be sending troops to Ukraine unless all those children came back and unless Vladimir Putin was arrested. Don't hold your breath on the second of those at the very least. Also, Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, wanted the Prime Minister to say that he was going to get on a flight to Canada to stand with allies against Trump's threats. Of course, Donald Trump wants Canada to become the 51st state, and there's been ongoing tariff war that we are now hit with too. The Prime Minister did not answer those questions directly. Of course, it is easy to shout from the sidelines. He's being super careful what they say. They do not want to do anything to antagonise Donald Trump. So that was my first takeaway. My second is that when it came to Kemi Badenoch, I thought she had a much better day today. She stayed on domestic matters. She was talking about jobs and the economy. I think that was the right move, given the verdict seems to be that the Prime Minister is doing pretty well on the international stage at the moment. So she went on the budget and how those tax rises are going to hit people. She says that up to 300,000 jobs are going to be lost. She was pointing out the increase to sending a child to nursery, the increase of care home costs, saying that the Prime Minister really didn't get what it was like for people on the ground. At one point, she says they trashed the economy with their bad choices. I must admit, I wrote that down and then I looked back at it later. For a second, I didn't know who had said it, because, of course, the unfortunate truth is for the Conservatives that Labour could and do say that too about the Conservatives, and particularly Liz Truss. And then the final thing, she did mention the farmers. Now, I say that because there was one instance a few weeks ago that there were literally hundreds of tractors outside in Westminster, and Kemi Badenoch went on something completely different and didn't mention the farmers at all. And they've had a couple of new bits of bad news in the last day or two. Talk of compulsory purchase of land yesterday, and today the news that this sustainable farming incentive for this year, applications have been closed. So they're very unhappy with those two new things, in addition to all the inheritance tax changes. So she has said that the budget is killing farming in this country.
Catherine Forster, thank you for your three takeaways there. Now we're joined here in the studio by Labour MP for Walthamstow, Stella Creasy, and Conservative MP for Gordon and Buchan, Harriet Cross.
And you've been sending in your questions to us, gbnews.com/your say. Remember, you drive this programme. It's your questions, whether you're watching or listening. You determine what we put to our panel. So, Stella Creasy from Labour, I will start with Weston-super-Mare. Why has my council gone up by 10%? It's another £12 a month. She also talks about black bins only to be collected every 3 weeks instead of 2. I don't expect you to be an expert on bin collection in Weston-super-Mare. But on her central point, her council tax is going up by 10%. She's getting less for it. And this is the central question. Where is the money supposed to come from? Where's it going? I'm a single pensioner missing out on pension credit.
Yeah, and you all know, Gloria, I'm somebody who's spent most of my political career campaigning for all those people there's too much month at the end of their money for. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is a difficult time. We know a lot of people are still struggling with the cost of living. We know that a lot of local authorities are having to make some very difficult choices because of the economic conditions that we are in. I know people want a knockabout about the history of how we've got to that stage as a country. I think given the uncertainty in the world stage as well, we know that's adding to further pressure. What I can say to somebody like Susan is, like, absolutely, she is at the forefront of our minds about how we turn this around, how we make sure that this country can deliver for somebody like her. I don't know why she's not eligible for pensions credit. If she was one of my constituents, I'd want to call her up and have that conversation with her, because there are support services out there, there are investments going on out there, but we need to know the details of her case. I just don't want to sugarcoat it. It is difficult, it is tough right now, and we're going to face further uncertainty. So the question is, how do we work through that together?
Harriet Cross, are is Labour government getting the right choices? I mean, that questionnaire from Kemi Badenoch referred to a Labour pledge to freeze council tax a year before the election in the last...
That wasn't the pledge. The pledge was to have longer funding periods for council tax so that people knew what their bills were going to be. Now, there is going to be a council tax debate in 2026. That's programmed in. But I do recognise, because we're in this difficult position right now, they haven't been able to say to councils, OK, we can go ahead with that piece of work. But the pledge was actually for longer periods of time. That was what was in the manifesto.
But the year before that, Labour did pledge under Keir Starmer to freeze it for a year.
The manifesto, that's what... I mean,
the manifesto what counts.
You know, hold us to that, because that's what we still want for election.
That's what Kemi Badenoch was saying in there. What do you think? Is it the right attack for Kemi Badenoch? Cost of living, massive increase in bills and taxes next month?
Absolutely. I mean, cost of living, the pressure on households at the moment is huge and growing. I think, to be honest, regardless of whether or not freezing council tax had been in the manifesto, enough of the manifesto that Labour brought forward has been broken, so it wouldn't have carried much weight anyway. The reason I think Susan and others, particularly pensioners, are feeling the pressure is because it's just another burden on top of other things. So, for example, winter fuel payment going away. We've seen a promise for energy bills to come down, but that hasn't happened under Labour. Again, now we're seeing the council tax going up. It's just pressure after pressure, and people are not seeing the end of it. There's broken promise after broken promise. They were promised sort of honey and lemons, and they're just only given the lemon part, which is really, really suffering across people's households.
Harriet Cross, you will know, like I know, our viewers know, our listeners know, Chris knows, Tony knows, council tax went up every year under the Tories. That's what makes it so difficult for you to get a hearing when you say, well, this is outrageous now.
It's incredibly difficult when they were told by Labour in 2023, as you said, that council tax wouldn't go up. So people thought that was what was going to happen under Labour. So it's very difficult for people to plan, to think that they're going to get one thing when something else has come in. When we see other changes, for example, the winter fuel payment, which hits pensioners as well, like Susan. So it's the build-up, it's the build-up of issues that are hitting people. And Chris, as you said, it's choices, and are Labour making the right choices? I think that's a question everyone can ask, and we'll probably get to the same answer.
One announcement there from Keir Starmer was no plans for a wealth tax. Now, that would be a reform to the council tax. Do you agree with that?
Well, we've actually got this planned in. I mean, and with the greatest will in the world, Harriet, in 2023, you guys were in government, so the council tax bills that people were getting were from a Conservative-led government and a Conservative-led economy. We are dealing with the consequences of the mess that was left behind. I absolutely recognise that we've got further economic instability, but we have got plans for the longer term, and I think it is right to look at council tax. It is right to look at it and how it's put into... because there are some elements of it that are deeply unfair to people. That doesn't help Susan right now. And what I am concerned about, and what I think your viewers need to hear, is that we get it. We get that for people like Susan, I mean, actually, there is help and support out there, and I'd hope, again, whoever is working with her, that they'd be looking at the Warm Homes programmes. I know I've had pensioners in my community in this position. We have actually got them support, and they have actually been entitled to help. That's why I'm concerned to understand what her background is.
Moving on from Susan, Janet's emailed us saying, do Janet, please tell us where you are. We'd love to know where our listeners and viewers are.
I am loving also that your programme is watched by women.
Oh, well, we're lots of women, thank goodness.
And...
Exactly. We are very balanced. Well, International Women's Day, isn't it? Yesterday or today.
I hope it's not just this week. I hope it's not just this week.
It's all the time, all the time, Stella, all the time. Now, listen, Janet says she's disabled with progressive multiple sclerosis. How is she supposed to work? She's worked since 15 years old. Now she's 50. She's going to be penalised for being disabled. Next week, we're going to hear probably some maybe £6 billion worth of cuts in the welfare budget. Are you happy about that?
Oh, look, I mean, Janet's case is a bit like fact, I had a gentleman in my community come to me whose mum has got early onset dementia, and she's, I think, possibly in a similar position that Janet is talking about. Absolutely, we can't have a generalist approach to this, but we do know there's 1 million young people who are locked out of work. There's 2.8 million people who can't work because of poor health. So actually, the reason why we're getting more appointments into the NHS, getting more people treated, is that helps people get back to work. All of these things are interconnected. That is very different from how do we make sure that we treat people like Janet and my constituent's mum with dignity, and that's what I'll be looking for in these proposals. No, I don't know what the proposals are, but what I am saying is that those cases and the need to make sure that we don't mistreat people like that is very much the forefront of my mind, as is helping those people who want to get back to work because they need a healthcare appointment.
And you're confident that nobody with the sort of serious conditions that Janet,
I am absolutely confident that many of us will be speaking up for those people, because the tragedy about early onset, I mean, and if you read the emails, you'd be heartbroken, is something that nobody would want to go through without that support.
Harriet Cross from the Conservatives. What are you hoping to see? The government have said they want to get the benefits bill down. Lots of people watching and listening will agree with them. What are your tests? What are the Conservative Party's sort of lines on this?
We have to absolutely get the balance between protecting people who have a genuine need for welfare and who cannot work. That is 100% focus that they should get them to support the need. People who can work, people who are choosing not to work, people who see benefits as a sort of a good enough reason not to work because they're in line with what they would be earning. They 100% should be back at work and should not be part of the benefit system, because they're actually putting a burden and taking more from the people who are genuinely in need. The bill, the benefits bill, is ballooning. It needs to come down.
Under your government, that was Keir Starmer's point to Kemi Badenoch. We've got to clear up this mess because it is unsustainable.
And we had a £12 billion of savings which we put forward, which Labour didn't look at. Since then, they've had £70 billion of spending in the budget, and that means now when they come round to looking at welfare spending, there's a lot less flexibility because they've had so much spending in the meantime.
Harriet, do you accept that getting the NHS working again, so those 2.8 billion people who cannot work because they have healthcare problems, they've been delayed and denied appointments under your government, your previous government. I know you were new elected, so I'm not going to blame you for your last government, but we inherited that mess of people not being able to get treated, so they couldn't work. Now we're getting the appointments into the system so they can get treated and then they can go back to work. So that is going to cut the benefit bill. I mean, one of the challenges for me as somebody who watched your government was just how disorganised and how the lack of coordination was pushing up prices. So what you're seeing now is a concerted effort to coordinate helping people, which is very different from actually, does the welfare system work to get those people that we would agree with, the people who've got early onset dementia, the people who've got MS, for example, the people who will never be able to work a full job because of their health condition, the support they need. Can you at least acknowledge that the work to get those extra appointments is going to make a difference?
Of course, extra appointments are always good. We recognise that, whether that's to do with people who are in and out of work or any other realm within society. People who are unhealthy, an unhealthy society is not a good thing. Is that the answer, the sole answer to the welfare bill? No, it's absolutely not. Is making sure people get back into work, regardless of the reason they're out of work, important? Yes. Is making being out of work for people who shouldn't be out of work less attractive? Yes, that's really important too. It can't all just be carrot. There has to be some stick. And if people are able to work, they should be working.
OK. I'm going to break in here quickly. A quick question from David. David, please do tell us where you're from, of course. Why isn't your leader, Kemi Badenoch, pushing the PM on the boats, the small boats, and our security? Who knows where they're coming from? This big issue, record numbers so far this year, biggest for 8 years.
Yeah.
Why is Kemi Badenoch not punishing the Labour government record on this?
You're absolutely right. I mean, as you say, record numbers this year are coming across the channel already. We have been working very hard on this. For example, the Borders Bill, which is going through at the moment, we've tabled a load of amendments to that to strengthen this, all of which have been turned down by Labour MPs, which is disappointing. For example, mandating things like age verification, so we know for sure how old people are. Seeing that people, as we said today, who are here and get asylum end up sort of on a student loan style, paying back the money they've brought in. Anyone with criminal conviction who is in the country is deported back to where they came from, because we do not want foreign criminals in this country. But what's really important, and what we've said from the start, is the first thing Labour did when they came in was cancel the Rwanda plan, the deterrent. And without a deterrent, it is very difficult to persuade people not to come here.
It's blatantly obvious that Rwanda was no deterrent at all, but it was a massive waste of money. It was a massive... Well, if you brought it in, numbers were going up under your previous government as well. It was a massive waste of money for poor people. I mean, Harry, you want me to ask your question? I will answer your question. Because it was a massive waste of money. It wasn't actually deterring anybody, because you have to understand why people are fleeing. Let's find where we agree.
How many gangs have been smashed since you came in? So that's what Labour's plan is.
You want to talk about something you had no plans at all. Your previous government's legislation, because many of us went through it, had absolutely nothing in to tackle the gangs, had absolutely nothing in. You were going after the people who were being exploited, the victims of modern slavery. You weren't actually going after the people exploiting them. So I'm not going to take any lectures from Conservatives who spend all their time on gunboats but no time actually taking on the smugglers. The issue for us now is what is driving those people, and do we have a good way of dealing with it? I want secure borders. I absolutely agree with you. Anybody who commits crime should not be in this country. I'd be surprised about your ideas about age verification.
So they're going to be supporting those amendments.
But that's not what you're doing. That's not what you're doing. What Keir Starmer is doing is getting a grip through border control. What we also need to do is deal with the reasons why people are running as well. And that's the issue that is ultimately going to deal with this issue.
Stella, so David asked a difficult question for Kemi Badenoch. John has a difficult question for your leader, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer. When is he going to stop blaming the Tories? It's getting boring now. Time he's stood up for his own actions, and the mess he's making of the UK economy. It's boring.
We all get the fierce urgency of now, of wanting to see things change. There is a reality that the economy was absolutely broken, that we inherited, and it is going to take time to turn that round. But the question is, what makes a bad situation worse? So for someone like me, who is passionate about what do we do about Europe, what do we do about Trump, that's where I want to focus our attention now.
A quick question. Should Keir Starmer go to Canada and say stands with... the new PM there?
In 10 seconds.
I do want him to go to Brussels and talk to them about what we can all do to make Europe stronger and stronger.
Canada, yes or no?
We should be talking to anyone who's an ally internationally.
OK.
Stella Creasy, Harriet Cross, you've been fantastic. You have been fantastic. Thank you for your questions. You've been watching or listening to PMQs Live with Gloria DePiero and Christopher Hope. Don't go anywhere, because up next it's Good Afternoon Britain with Miriam Cates and Nana Akua.
Here's the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A chilly one out there today. The wind's coming down from the north, bringing a bit of sunshine, but also quite a few showers, which will have some sleet, a bit of snow, and some hail mixed in as well. High pressure is moving in from the north, but the winds are coming down from the North Sea, and these weather fronts are providing quite a few showers, some across southernmost counties, bit of sleet and snow for a time over the hills, and these showers coming into eastern Scotland, northern England, down towards the Midlands. They will have some hail, sleet and a bit of snow mixed in as well. By this afternoon, chiefly, there will be of rain as temperatures pick up to 7 or 8 degrees Celsius, but it feels a lot colder than that because of that brisk wind. Much of Wales, Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, dry and fine, and we'll have some sunny spells here. And further east, the showers will tend to fade overnight, but certainly still some coming in across the Northern Isles, down through Aberdeenshire, snow on the hills here during the evening time. And wherever we've got these showers coming in, as temperatures drop overnight, it could turn quite icy. A fine evening, though, generally across Northern Ireland, and not too many showers across the southwest, but showers will continue over parts of the Midlands and eastern England well into the evening time. So again, here, as temperatures fall, it could turn a little bit icy through the night, and something to be aware of first thing on Thursday morning. The showers will tend to ease for the Midlands, so turning drier here. Any showers across Wales also tending to fade away. Large, clear spells across southwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, meaning temperatures will drop well below freezing in rural spots. Close to freezing in most towns and cities, and certainly again feeling chilly with the winds coming in from the North Sea. So these showers making for potentially icy conditions first thing in the morning. Again, mostly of rain, a bit of sleet, some hail, but still a little bit of snow is possible at times, particularly over the hills as the showers feed in during Thursday. Many western areas dry with some sunny intervals, but everywhere feeling chilly.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We want to spruce up your spring with an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash that you can spend however you like. But that's not all, as you'll also receive not one, but 2 brand new designer watches and a fabulous Mulberry handbag. For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and a designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the parents in the right, or should they really be taking their kids out during holiday, during end of term break?
Good morning. Yes, it's a real interesting one, but I think there are a few problems with it. There are already 443,000 absences per year. And actually, if they did get their policy and everyone could have this time off, holiday companies aren't here for the fun of it. They're going to just up the prices all year round. And I think that's what this is about. A lot of parents want to grab an absolute bargain. And it's kind of selfish because a holiday is a choice. It's not a necessity. One of the other things they talk about is SEND children also need to have time off. Now, I am a mum of a child who has a disability, so I understand the complex needs with that, but that's a given. You know, that's something to take up with a local authority. It's you're allowed to have time off if your child has a medical condition. So, yeah.
It's obviously quite a divisive issue, isn't it? It does separate people into 2 camps. There's people who want to take their kids out during term time to save a bit of cash, and then there's people who think that children should be in school when they're supposed to be in school. How do you think they'll get on with this campaign? Do you think they'll have any success?
Well, I don't think they will, to be honest with you. I think it's too small. And the other thing is it's quite disruptive on the classroom. If you can imagine, I already play catch up because my son has half a day off a week. So I can imagine if that's going on all year round with all the children, trying to keep track of it, sounds an absolute nightmare to me. I mean, personally, I'd rather just go away on holiday on my own without my child and have some relaxation. So that would be my advice to them. Get the granny in.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 12th of March, and I'm Miriam Cates.
I'm Nana Akwe. So Sir Keir Starmer and Kevin Page not clash over the economy during PMQs, and the Prime Minister says the UK will keep all options on the table to respond to Donald Trump's decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. We'll be bringing you the latest.
And are we on the cusp of peace in Ukraine? Donald Trump challenges Vladimir Putin to tango and accept a ceasefire deal that has already been agreed with the Ukrainians. But it comes as Russia launches a fresh wave of blistering strikes overnight. We'll be hearing from our security editor.
And it's day 2 of the Cheltenham Festival, known as Style Wednesday. We sent Jack Carson to soak in the atmosphere. Jack, how is it going there?
Style Day here at Cheltenham, day 2. All the excitement expected to get underway in about 20 minutes' time, and Her Majesty the Queen has arrived at the racecourse.
Well, as always, we want to hear from you what you think about all the things we're going to be discussing today at gbnews.com/your say. But Nana, this news on Ukraine is fascinating, isn't it? Donald Trump is certainly changing the way that we see the world.
Do you know what I think he's doing? He's doing the thing that Vladimir Putin, and I actually heard somebody on the radio say that his dad slightly resembles Putin, so it's like a parenting. I don't think so. Let's know that.
Psychologists would have a field day.
That was a psychologist.
Oh, well, there you go.
I think what he's doing is he's doing the unpredictable thing that he is known for, which is why he sort of wrong foots his enemies or people who he's working with. And he's thrown it all up in the air, isn't he? Literally. And we need that, don't we?
Yeah, and if you just think just a couple of weeks ago, that extraordinary press conference, and everybody said, this is it, there's no chance for peace now, and yet there's been more movement towards peace in the last 24 hours than there has for 3 years. So we'll see. Anyway, lots more on that later. But first of all, your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nana, Miriam, thank you very much. The top stories. Well, Donald Trump's top diplomat, Marco Rubio, has ramped up pressure on the Russian president to accept a ceasefire deal with Ukraine, who agreed to a 30-day ceasefire organised by the US during talks with Saudi Arabia. Rubio says the US hopes to have a positive answer from Russia, adding he would urge Vladimir Putin to end all hostilities so people will stop dying. Mr. Rubio told reporters the ball is now in Russia's court. And speaking today, he said there's no military solution to the conflict and that the US will speak with Russia today. President Zelensky hailed what he called constructive talks and says he wants to use a potential 30-day ceasefire with Russia as a chance to draft a permanent peace plan which could include security guarantees. Sir Keir Starmer hailed Ukraine's backing for US ceasefire proposals as a remarkable breakthrough as the Defence Secretary heads to Paris for talks to cement European peacekeeping efforts. Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury James Murray welcomed the news.
Well, I think it's a remarkable breakthrough and it's testament to the work between President Trump and President Zelensky in recent days. And it now really means the ball is in Russia's court. It's for Russia to now respond to the ceasefire proposal, Russia to agree to that deal that's on the table. And we will continue to play our role as an honest broker. So the Prime Minister is looking to convene world leaders this Saturday to continue playing the role the UK has been playing to try and move us towards peace in the war between Ukraine and Russia.
Prince William will travel to Estonia next week to visit British troops involved in NATO operations there as part of Britain's drive to show solidarity with its allies and highlight its commitment to the defence of the alliance's eastern flank. During the two-day visit, which begins on the 20th of March, the Prince of Wales will also carry out engagements in the capital Tallinn to learn more about how the country has responded to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Elsewhere, Sir Keir Starmer says the UK would keep all options on the table to respond to the US president's decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. The business secretary earlier described Donald Trump's decision to impose the global tariffs as disappointing. The industry has also warned President Trump's tariffs on UK steel couldn't come at a worse time. The European Union announced it would be implementing counter-tariffs on £21.6 billion worth of goods starting on the 1st of April. Sir Keir Starmer told the Commons today the UK would keep open the option of retaliatory measures after Donald Trump hit steel and aluminium imports with 25% tariffs.
Like everybody else, I'm disappointed to see global tariffs in relation to steel and aluminium. But we will take a pragmatic approach. We are, as he knows, negotiating an economic deal which covers and will include tariffs if we succeed. But we will keep all options on the table.
Former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has announced she will not seek re-election to Holyrood next year. Ms Sturgeon, who represents the Glasgow South Side constituency, made the announcement today. In a letter to local SNP members, she said, "I'm writing to let you know that I've decided not to seek re-election to the Scottish Parliament next year." She says she'll be with the SNP every step of the way towards independence, despite stepping down as an MSP. Sturgeon resigned as First Minister in March 2023 after 8 years in the role. And the arrested captain of the Solong, the container ship involved in the crash in the North Sea, is a Russian national, according to the vessel's owners. The rest of the crew were Russian and Filipino nationals, according to shipping company Ernst Russ. It comes after police said a man had been arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter in connection with the Monday's collision. Humberside police said a 59-year-old in custody to allow inquiries to take place, and officers are talking to those involved to find out what happened. The force added investigators have started a criminal probe into the cause of the collision between the Stena Immaculate and Solong off the coast of East Yorkshire on Monday, and are working with the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
7 minutes after 1 o'clock. It was yet another feisty PMQs today. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, choosing to lead on the economy, criticising Sir Keir Starmer's handling of the country's finances.
And that's why in 2 weeks, the Chancellor will come to this House to present an emergency budget the Prime Minister said we would not need. They will try and make out it's because of global events, but the truth is they trash the economy with their bad choices. They'd look after pensioners, then they snatched winter fuel payments. They said that they would be pro-business, but they hiked taxes on jobs. And he, Mr. Speaker, he promised to freeze council tax, but it's going up by £100. This is a high-tax, low-growth, job-killing government.
However, the Prime Minister hit back, criticising the Conservatives' record on the economy when they were in government.
Inflation under them, 11%. £22 billion black hole. A mini budget that made us the laughing stock of the world, and they want to give lectures on the economy to us. No, thank you very much.
Well, to react to that exchange and everything else that went on at PMQs, we're now joined by GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, it was quite a lively PMQs, but quite a predictable set of questioning.
Well, yes, indeed. But I thought it was interesting that Kemi Badenoch chose to go all on domestic matters. And I think that was a smart move because she had a better outing. Sometimes she doesn't seem to land much of a blow on the Prime Minister these days. But I think this today, they'll be quite happy with that because she went fundamentally on jobs, didn't she? And the economy, and specifically, the measures that the government announced in that budget back in October, the employers' national insurance increase, which many businesses say are hurting them. She is maintaining that up to 300,000 jobs could be lost as a result. She's highlighting things like care homes that face big increases in their costs, nurseries, and so on and so forth. Her basic message to the PM was you don't get out much, you don't really know what it's like for people on the ground. But I think her line about they trash the economy with their bad choices, unfortunately, that's pretty much what Labour said that the Tories did when they were in government, and particularly under Liz Truss. But quite a successful outing, I think, for Kemi Badenoch. She did talk about the farmers too. There was once a few weeks ago that there were hundreds of tractors in Westminster. She didn't touch on farming at all. So she did go after farming today. They, of course, have been hit with yet another blow with this announcement that the sustainable farming incentive for this year has been closed to new applications. But on tariffs, of course, the big story of the day. Sir Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, wants the Prime Minister to get on a plane to Canada. Canada having a very, very bumpy ride as neighbour to the United States, are wanting the PM to stand with allies against Trump's threats. The PM being incredibly careful what he says about Canada in particular, stressing they're an ally, but also tariffs and Trump's behaviour more broadly. He says that he is disappointed, yes, that the US is bringing in tariffs on steel and aluminium from the UK at 25%, but saying, look, they're taking a pragmatic approach and that's what's needed ultimately to get what they hope will be a trade deal with America. I think we are some way off that. Worth saying that this is a global rollout, the special relationship that we hear so much about. Only a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump was suggesting that perhaps we might escape them because of that special relationship, but it seems, for the moment at least, that's not happening.
Catherine Forster, thank you very much. So, are we on the cusp of peace in Ukraine? Donald Trump has challenged Vladimir Putin to tango and accept a ceasefire deal that has already been agreed with the Ukrainians.
Well, this followed what are being considered successful talks between the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and President Zelensky's Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak in Saudi Arabia yesterday.
Take this offer now to the Russians, and we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball's now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Well, President Donald Trump also gave his reaction to the talks, hinting that he could speak to Vladimir Putin as early as this week.
Get the Russians
I'll
to
talk
agree?
to Vladimir Putin, yeah.
When will
I
you
want to
talk
get,
to him?
look, that's the other, it takes two to tango, as they say, right? So hopefully he'll also agree, and I really think that would be 75% of the way. The rest is getting it documented and, you know, negotiating land positions, etc.
So you'll talk to him this week about the deal?
I think so, yeah.
And this comes as Russia launched a fresh wave of blistering strikes on Ukraine overnight, casting doubt on Vladimir Putin's willingness to accept Donald Trump's demands for peace. Well, if you want to find out more, let's have a chat with our News and Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, so what more could you tell us?
Well, the overnight raids concentrated on the city of Odessa, that port city, which is really following a pattern of very significant airstrikes, drone strikes coming from Russia. You can see the damage that was caused by this latest barrage and a number of fatalities reported. It's not all one way, though. The last couple of days, Ukraine has sent significant numbers of drones over to Russia as well, to the Russian capital, Moscow, claiming lives and injuring multiple people in those locations. So it just really hammers home the urgent need to get some kind of a ceasefire and eventual peace talks underway. And the next stage in that process will be with the Russian officials and US officials in Moscow. Thus far, responding to the fact that Ukraine has said that they will accept the terms of this 30-day ceasefire, Russia has said that it won't agree on anything until it's actually been able to see the details of that. And these US officials will be flying out to Moscow in the coming hours for those talks to let them know exactly what is on the table as far as this 30-day secession is. It's not the talks proper, of course it's not, but it will pave the way, hopefully, for more substantive talks on the real big issues, the sticking points. And they were briefly discussed, according to the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. You see him there on the ground at Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. He said that there were interim talks, discussions with the Ukrainians about the potential for giving up some land in any deal. So it's clearly on the table already at this stage, but nothing very significant on that has been discussed. That is quite a bit further down the road.
Well, thank you very much for that report, Mark. Well, for more reaction on the Ukraine deal, well, let's speak to the assistant editor at The Spectator, Lisa Hazeldine. Lisa, this seems to be quite an extraordinary step forward, doesn't it? But as far as we're aware, the Russians have yet to agree to anything.
Yeah, that's right. The Kremlin gave comment this morning basically saying that they will await to see the details of what Ukraine and the Americans have sort of discussed before they basically pass any comment. And the spokesperson for the Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, was saying that, you know, chances are that Putin and Trump will have a conversation if they need to on the phone, but they're really, holding their cards close to their chest.
Lisa, do you think, a lot of people are commenting on Donald Trump and saying how a lot of people saying he's lost the plot and he's, messing around and his tactics are dangerous. In your view, do you think that actually the way he's behaving is exactly as he should be behaving in a way to kind of bring Vladimir Putin to the table?
Yeah, I think there's definitely benefits to what a lot of people view as Trump's quite erratic behaviour. I think in Moscow particularly, that has been taken note of, the fact that Trump is somebody who is even more unpredictable, even more ruthless when he needs to be than Putin in some respects. So I think this is definitely a tactic that may well work to bring Putin to the negotiating table. Obviously, it's a whole other question as to whether or not Putin will even agree to anything that the Americans propose.
Now, Lisa, fascinatingly, there has been almost no EU involvement in these talks, the Europeans are desperate to get involved in peacekeeping. We've heard lots of talk about rearming, spending more GDP on defence. What do you anticipate will the role be of the EU, of European leaders following this, or at the moment, are they out in the cold?
At the moment, particularly in regard to these talks that are going on between America, Ukraine and Russia, they've, as you say, Miriam, they are kind of out in the cold. They have been trying to hold their own summits. Keir Starmer hosted in London. There have been similar summits in Brussels as well to basically figure out what sort of role Europe is likely to play in supporting Ukraine going forward. I think particularly if a peace deal or a truce is struck, it may well come down to European peacekeeping forces to keep an eye on that. One of the big problems with that is the fact that the Kremlin has outright rejected any suggestion that they'd be willing to have sort of European peacekeeping forces so close to their border. So that is going to be something that will need to be hashed out. But also Trump has said that he's really not that interested in playing that sort of frontline defensive role for Ukraine in the aftermath of any sort of truce or peacekeeping negotiations. So I think in that sense, being the boots on the ground, policing how any of this plays out once sort of things are signed on the dotted line, that is going to be Europe's responsibility, I think.
Now, what on earth's happened to Sir Keir Starmer's coalition of the willing then? Because this is something that, he trumped up, which was, with Macron, the two of them, they got the leaders together and people were supposed to be willingly participating. A couple of questions on that. What's happened to it? And in his coalition of the willing, because it was very vague on detail, did it have a sort of Article 5 type scenario where an attack on one is an attack on all? Or was it just a load of willing people joining together in a...
So, yeah, I think so. Defence ministers from the countries that have so far expressed an interest in being part of this coalition of the willing. I think a meeting actually today, if not tomorrow, to sort of hash out further details of what this might look like, exactly what their responsibilities might include and basically what they're willing to commit to. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to say exactly how far that might go, not least because Russia is... For Russia at the moment, this is an absolute hard line, and they see this as a sort of part of the reason, essentially, that they claim they went to war in Ukraine in the first place. So I think it's going to be really, delicate to navigate, let's put it that way.
And of course, that is the big long-term question, is that even if Russia does agree to this 30-day ceasefire, what is Russia's game plan long-term? Is it really willing to lay down arms? What will happen if it does try another incursion into Ukraine? And do you think Trump's strategy, or his supposed strategy of trying to peel Putin away from China, is actually going to work? Could it be that it's Russia that's playing games, that it's Russia that's in control now in this situation?
Yeah, I think at the moment Russia very much is in control of the situation. They're still making advances in Ukraine. They have been on the front foot in this war for a little while now, not least sort of in the past week or so, obviously with the US pausing military and sort of intelligence sharing with Ukraine. That will have sort of created an even bigger gap, I suppose, in how the two sides are fighting. So at the moment, there's not really much incentive, I would say, for Putin to lay down arms, to say yes. The one thing also I would say is that a 30-day truce, if Putin has no intention of actually really sticking to it or to sort of signing a long-term peace agreement at the end of it, all that's going to do is give him 30 days to sort of rearm further, sort of stockpile and basically strengthen to then go again. So I think, it's really hard to say what exactly is going to come from this, and also Putin's motivations in this war there have been a few sort of theories alongside the fact that he wants to bring Ukraine into this sort of Russian world, as it were, but also kind of the fact that he's talked over the past 3 years quite a lot about the fact that he's now sort of at war with NATO and he sees them as the big adversary. So there's also, I think, a bit of motivation on his part of wanting to assert himself on the global stage as the strongman leader. And I think actually by talking to him now, bringing him into negotiations at this point when he is at an advantage in this war, will only strengthen or sort of give validation to his position on the global stage, as opposed to making him a pariah, which up until now has kind of been the strategy from Europe and the West.
Do you think it might actually make him think, because you're giving him an exit strategy, I think, because when you've gone up that far, and it's like when you're in an argument with someone, you don't really want to come back and go, oh, well, actually, I'm... So this is an exit strategy for him, I think. Listen, Lisa Hazeldine, thank you very much. She's the assistant editor at The Spectator, thank you. Yeah, do you think that? Because I think President Trump is a similar kind of character as Vladimir Putin in many respects, and Vladimir Putin needs a way of walking away, but still looking like a victor.
Absolutely, and any solution that means it looks like he's failed or he can't say that he's won at least some sort of victory to his people is a non-starter, isn't it? He needs that. But I think the question is about who would police it and what happens if a ceasefire is broken, because I think in January 2023 they agreed a 36-hour ceasefire for the Orthodox Christmas, and the Russians broke it in 2 hours.
Well, the Russians have broken everything. I mean, the Budapest Memorandum, which is the collection of countries that said that they would help Ukraine if they disarmed and got rid of their nuclear weapons. Russia was one of the signatories for it, and they were quite a big signatory. So, and exactly as Vladimir Zelensky has said, can you trust them? They say one thing, they don't do it, they do another.
And if they did break the ceasefire, would America ultimately be willing to retaliate in some way? And if not, what's the point?
I think the point here, though, is to show that Ukraine, that Russia are the aggressor. So they've been given their hand. They've said, like, OK, we are asking for peace. Ukraine have agreed to it. It's to demonstrate that I think Russia are the aggressors, and therefore that will then we can all say, right, we can attack.
Yeah, well, the ball's certainly in Putin's court right now.
Make the right move.
We'll find out soon what happens, and we'll be covering this throughout the programme. But if you want to make your spring spectacular, please join in our latest Great British giveaway with your chance to win £17,777 in tax-free cash.
No, that's not all. It's not just the money. You'll also win not one, but two sought-after designer watches and a designer handbag or bag. Maybe you're a man bag. If you want to look and feel the part this spring, then here are all the details that you need.
You could have £17,777 in tax-free cash to play with this spring. Cash to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we're also going to give you not one, but two sought-after designer watches and the latest Mulberry handbag. How would winning that sound?
Oh my God, that's brilliant news.
For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and a designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck indeed. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. We're live at Cheltenham Racecourse as day 2 of the legendary festival gets underway. Do not go anywhere.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, parents across the country who have suffered a miscarriage will now be granted the right to bereavement leave. It's hard to believe that wasn't part of the law before. Well, it's now part of Labour's reforms on workers' rights.
Well, the change will benefit those who lose a pregnancy before 24 weeks.
Well, it's a victory for Keely Lenthorne. She's the woman who's led the campaign for the law to be changed. And finally, it has. And Keely is with us now. She's the founder of George's Law and a partner, she's a lawyer as well, at RWK Goodman. And she herself has suffered 3 miscarriages. Keely joins us now. And Keely, it is so good to see see you. Victory at last.
Victory at last. We've come a long way, Ellie.
Yeah. And we've spoken over the years so many times, haven't we? You've been campaigning for years for this under George's law.
Yeah.
And it happened on George's birthday this week.
It did. So, yeah, it all started back in 22, shortly after I lost George. Obviously met you shortly after, started the campaign, and yeah, Monday evening will go down in history, George's 3rd birthday, and being told that, yeah, it's going to finally be law.
So what will happen now? How much leave will women be able to have?
So now it will even mirror that if you lose a baby after 24 weeks. So in its current stance, the law says if you lose a baby over 24 weeks, you get 2 weeks paid leave. So the same will now apply if you lose a baby under 24 weeks, so from 0 to 24.
It is unbelievable that the way that the law stood was that you could potentially have lost a baby at, let's say, 8 p.m. and you would be expected to be in the office at 9 a.m. the next morning.
Yeah, and if you think I had a 12-hour labour with George, I bathed him, I left him at the mortuary, but the law says that I should be, as a lawyer, back in work time recording the next day.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Good afternoon, Britain on GB News.
And it's day 2 of the Cheltenham Festival, and racegoers are wrapped up warm, enjoying the racing, a drink and a flutter.
One person we hope hasn't had a drink just yet, our very own Jack Carson. Jack, talk to us. What's the latest? It is Style Wednesday now. It was Ladies' Day, but they didn't want that, did they? So to have a more inclusive environment, it's now called Style Wednesday. Talk to us about this. How is everything?
Yeah, no, it's been another fantastic atmosphere. Plenty of more spectacular hats on show than there were yesterday. That is a fact. Certainly lots of people making the effort today for Style Wednesday. You're right, it's the last couple of years that it's officially been called something else, that not Ladies' Day. It's been quietly not advertised as Ladies' Day since about 2018. In the last couple of years, officially renamed to Style Wednesday. There are awards given out today for the best dressed man and woman, and a big push from the Jockey Club on more slow fashion and re-wearing items that people already have in their wardrobes. But one special guest here at the racecourse today is Her Majesty Queen Camilla. She arrived a short while ago in a tailored dress with a burgundy bag and a faux fur-rimmed hat as well. Certainly needing that coat for how chilly it's been. We saw the snow this morning, quite spectacular, a snowstorm here at Cheltenham, but that has since cleared up. But the royals that are in attendance today, such as Her Majesty the Queen, opting for something a little bit more warmer today. Also appearing today are His Majesty the King's niece Zara Tindall and also Princess Eugenie with her husband Jack Brooksbank as well. All similarly going for something a little bit more burgundy today. We know the Queen is a joint patron with His Majesty the King of the Jockey Club, and recently at the start of this month also announced as the royal patron of the British Racing School. So we know she personally takes a big interest in horse racing and allowing that next generation of racers to come through as well. But you're mentioning today's Style Wednesday, lots of fantastic fashion on display. We caught up with a few people as they came into the racecourse earlier on. All day, and you're looking very stylish.
That's very kind, thank you very much.
Where have you come from?
We're from Sheffield.
And how excited are you to be here today?
Oh wow, it's been brilliant. We've stayed overnight actually in Cheltenham. Yes. Oh gosh, the best racing ever. I'm going with the whole slow fashion thing, so trying to reinvent my wardrobe. So there's a little bit of everything here. So mostly warmth today. Obviously, there's a lot of layers, but I made my own hat.
She made her own hat.
Yeah, I think that lady's advice. There are a lot of layers certainly needed. When it gets into the shadow of the sun, it really is quite chilly with the wind. But the big race today is the Queen Mother's Champion Chase. Her Majesty the Queen will present the winning owner, trainer and jockey of that race, the trophy in that official presentations. That's something to look out for a little bit later on. We've just had the first race as well, the New Lion winning that first race at 1:20. It is well underway. We could just from out here hear the crowd, the roar from Cheltenham. It's quite something when you are part of it, and that excitement I'm sure will continue throughout this afternoon as we get more races here.
Well, Carson, thank you very much, Jack. Speak to you soon. That's Jack Carson. He's out there at Cheltenham at the racecourse. It's lovely, isn't it?
And fantastic hats. They were rather spectacular. Not sure how you see where you're going when you're wearing that, but anyway. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show, including shocking research that revealed that TikTok videos have contributed to a dramatic increase in ADHD diagnosis. But that's after your headlines with Tatiana.
Miriam, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Donald Trump's top diplomat Marco Rubio has ramped up pressure on the Russian president to accept a 30-day ceasefire deal with Ukraine, organised by the US. Rubio says the US hopes to have a positive answer from Russia, adding he would urge Vladimir Putin to end all hostilities so people will stop dying. Mr. Rubio told reporters the ball is now in Russia's court. Speaking today, he said there's no military solution to the conflict and that the US will speak with Russia today. President Zelensky hailed what he called constructive talks and says he wants to use a potential 30-day ceasefire with Russia as a chance to draft a permanent peace plan, which could include security guarantees. Sir Keir Starmer hailed Ukraine's backing for US ceasefire proposals as a remarkable breakthrough as the Defence Secretary heads to Paris for talks to cement European peacekeeping efforts. Sir Keir Starmer says the UK would keep all options on the table to respond to the US President's decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. The Business Secretary described Donald Trump's decision to impose global tariffs as disappointing. The industry has also warned President Trump's tariffs on UK steel couldn't come at a worse time. The European Union announced it would be implementing counter-tariffs on £21.6 billion worth of goods starting on the 1st of April. Sir Keir Starmer told the Commons the UK would keep open the option of retaliatory measures after Donald Trump hit steel and aluminium imports with 25% tariffs.
Like everybody else, I'm disappointed to see global tariffs in relation to steel and aluminium. But we will take a pragmatic approach. We are, as he knows, negotiating an economic deal which covers and will include tariffs if we succeed. But we will keep all options on the table.
And the Queen has attended Style Day at Cheltenham Festival today, serving in her role as joint patron of the Jockey Club. Queen Camilla will present the trophy to the winning owner, jockey and trainer of the Queen Mother Champion steeplechase. Earlier this morning, a flurry of snow fell on the famous racecourse before thousands of spectators descended on